This is the Coach Bru Show. This is also the world's shortest podcast intro.
Welcome to The Athletics of Business, a podcast about how the traits and behaviors of elite athletes and remarkable business leaders frequently intersect. The real stories and hard lessons to help you level up your leadership and performance. Now your host, Ed Molitor.
Welcome, everybody, to the Coach Bru podcast, and is also, it's not just a Coach Bru podcast, it's the Athletics of Business podcast. We are doing a tag team, the dynamic duo of yours truly and Ed Molitor. I guess they call it a dual podcast, Ed, where it's me interviewing you on on my podcast, and then you interviewing me on your podcast. But this whole thing, I guess, goes on the interwebs together. And I guess the purpose of it is to grow our respective audiences. And that's kind of, the first point I want to touch on is, you and I do the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I love you, and we are kindred spirits, my brother from another mother, is you don't view me as competition, and I certainly don't view you as competition. I view you, I have this philosophy that a rising tide raises all boats. Mm-hmm. And I know you subscribe to that as well. So,
Absolutely.
There'll be people on your list that, my message will resonate with. There'll be people on your list that it won't. But, if I can help you grow your brand and you can help me grow my brand, everybody wins, people don't just listen to one podcast or only read books from one author. We need to root for each other. I think it's what real success is when you root for each other. And thrilled to connect with you because I know you subscribe to the same thing, man.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here, and thanks for coming up with this wonderful idea.
Well, thanks for having me on your podcast too.
Well, and that as well. Yes, we'll get used to that. It's a little bit like the dueling pianos at a great Irish bar. Okay, I don't know if we'll be as much fun, but we will be fun. But no, I appreciate it. And, it's funny that we're doing this now at this time, not to timestamp our podcast, like how I said our podcast there. Not to timestamp it, but one of the things I've learned with all these incredible interviews I've had on the Athletics of Business podcast with my guests is how important it is to share information, to share best practices, and to pick the brains of other people. And that really comes back from your coaching days, from my coaching days. Isn't that what we wanted to do, was learn from each other?
Yeah, it's, it harkens me back to the days of going to, whether it's a national convention or speaking at a regional clinic, and just kind of sitting around the table with your peers and sharing ideas, whether it's, how you run your offense, practice planning, team culture, whatever it might be.
Yep. Those are some of the best days. It's
information
fun.
sharing. Yeah.
That's it. I mean, some of my favorite times of coaching were going to the Nike clinics or other clinics. I mean, I have a box in our storage area down in the basement. I have a box of all my clinic notes, but inside of there are countless bar napkins with plays drawn up on them and notes on motivation and notes on culture and things like that. So it is my pleasure. This is fun.
Yep, absolutely. So I don't know if people can hear my puppy barking, but I will say this: if you're a parent listening to this and your child wants to get a dog, understand that it'll be their dog at 3 p.m. It'll be your dog at 3 a.m. when it wants to go out or it's barking, crying. So that's what we're dealing with here. We're in lockdown with the whole quarantine thing, probably like day 90 at least over here. And my kids are driving me nuts because they don't listen. It's like the hostages have the guns on the plane right about now. That's the best analogy I can come up with.
Well, I don't know about you, but what I found out is when the kids are quiet, the dog barks. When the dog barks, the kids seem to be quiet. And then at some point in the day, usually when I'm on a podcast, all hell will be breaking loose.
Well, what's the worst, and anyone who's ever parented anyone, like human, dog, whatever, what's worse is the bad quiet, which is when everyone's quiet. And you're like, oh, crap, what are they each up to respectively? Because it can't be good if there's silence in a house full of kids and pets.
Well, and yeah, here it means something happened.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Something
Yeah.
happened and don't let dad find out.
It's usually something breaking
Yeah.
or a mess.
Yeah.
But I want to get back. This is all about you, Ed. At least the first half of this show is. And you know, one of the things we forgot to do is we forgot to mention we had some live reads of sponsors of the show, and I want to remind everyone on my end of things that this podcast is brought to you by CoachBru.com. And you can go to CoachBru.com, subscribe to my list if you haven't already, and you'll receive a complimentary copy, digital download of my premium newsletter reserved typically for my inner circle. It's a $99 value. Go to CoachBru.com for that. And Ed, who is sponsoring the podcast on your end today?
Well, we're going to go real easy. We'll go with the MolitorGroup.com. Okay. And like you go to MolitorGroup.com, you will have all the information about what we do at the Molitor Group: executive coaching, leadership consulting, as well as a keynote speaking. And there is a tab there to get to the podcast. And you can opt in there, get on our mailing list. We as well, and you are a fan. We have a weekly newsletter that you'll get every Friday, and it's a pretty cool community that we have going.
The best way I could describe Ed is he's like a younger, smarter, better looking version of me. So head over to molitorgroup.com, get his Friday podcast. What I love about your list, your subscription is, some people just push out like, here's my podcast or here's an article. It'll be here and there. You never know when it's coming. Like it'll be once a month. Yours is benchmarked. Every Friday you are getting an article and a link to the podcast. The two typically are incredibly congruent and very timely. So yeah, I would encourage all of my people to head over to the molitorgroup.com.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. When the podcast drops on Wednesday, we try to tie that week's newsletter with that podcast. But every now and then, and we've seen this a little bit lately with what we're going through, we'll pull up a guest. Yep. We'll pull up an old podcast, and we'll put links to two different podcasts and how they tie into what we're talking about now. And I've got to tell you, your content is unbelievable. It gets me fired up. It makes me think, right? And the best thing about it makes me take action.
Awesome. Yeah, I can be a little instigational, which I think is good because, that information is useless if you don't find a way to act on it. And, what's interesting is I view your stuff the same way you view my stuff. And, I'd love for my audience to hear a little bit about your backstory, Ed, because there are a lot of similarities.
Well, there are a lot of similarities. So I spent the beginning of my professional career as a college basketball coach. And grew up, let me back up a little bit more because it really fills into the Athletics of Business brand that we have. And grew up a coach's son. My family's originally from the south side of Chicago. My father was a coach in the Catholic League. And I grew up in a lot of locker rooms and a lot of gyms. And I'll tell you what, for me, it was an incredible way to grow up. And I kept hearing certain messages over and over from my father. And he's won over 500 games. And he's more well known for what he did and the impact he had on his kids' lives than he is for any games he won or any Hall of Fame he's in. But the message I kept hearing was that athletics is a microcosm of life. And for me, basketball is a frame of mind game, right? You can insert any sport, but for me, it was basketball as a frame of mind game. In 1998, when we got let go, our head coach got let go at Texas A&M. I got out of the business. I was young. I was dumb. I was 28.
You were coaching college for how many years at that point?
At that point, it was six years.
So you're well into it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was 4 years at a Division II school, helping rebuild a great program there. A gentleman that hired me, Jim White, still gave me my first opportunity. Forever grateful to him. He probably still regrets it, but he's the head coach at University of Buffalo now. Great friend, great man, one of the really, really true good guys in the business that has a few sketchy people in it, but a great game. But anyway, so we got let go. I was in it 6 years. Basketball is all I knew, right? Now, I'd already changed my major in college from pre-med to business so I could become a college basketball coach. I went into the mortgage business and was very successful, had a great run, loved it, but kind of kept bouncing back and forth. But what I saw was very prevalent was what allowed me to be successful, what allowed others to be successful as an athlete and in the coaching world were really the keys and the drivers to success in the business world. And it played out every single day, whether it had something to do with your work ethic, whether it had to do something with your ability to develop relationships and trust, with your enthusiasm, your passion for what you did. So I spent years bouncing back and forth between the mortgage business and coaching college basketball. And then finally got out and I became vice president of operations for a recruiting firm where we specialized. It was phenomenal. We specialized in placing former military in jobs throughout the country. And I loved it. But one thing dawned on me. I realized.
Well, you're a recruiter.
Well, that's what it was. But
it's just
and
your recruits changed a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, recruits change, but you develop relationships. But there's what I missed, right? When you're a college coach, and you know this, when you're a college coach, it's about the impact, right? It's transformational, not transactional. Well, once those candidates were placed, and once the clients, their recs were filled, that kind of was the end of the relationships until they needed us again. I missed having that long-term impact on individuals and organizations and teams. And that's why I launched the Molitor Group just about 4 years ago. And that's what we do. And that's what I do. And I absolutely love it.
What's a typical day in the life of Ed Molitor now compared to being in the mortgage industry, coaching basketball, recruiting, executive search? What's a typical day like now? I just kind of want to get a sense of, kind of the corporate parallels with what you're doing now and what you did in the past. And, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. So that's why I asked that.
No, it's a great question. And we're going to say now, let's pretend that COVID isn't here and what
the
typical day was. Now
I'm
blessed.
Dude, I am happy to pretend that the COVID didn't exist.
Or it's past us, whichever, right?
Exactly.
So now it's, I'm very intentional about certain things in my life. And, I wake up early and I have a routine. I stick to my routine. My routine in the morning consists of meditation, consists of prayer, consists of a workout, depending on what day of the week it is, and journaling. Okay. And then I get my day going. And then I work until it's time to get the family up. Like for instance, today I'm currently training for a half Ironman at the end of August. So today I was in a pool at 4:30 in the morning. Okay. I came home. I actually knocked out another hour and a half's worth of work, got the family up, get them ready for their day. And then I get back at it, and I spend the day on the phone. I spend the day on the computer, and I'm building relationships. I'm talking to potential clients. I'm creating content. I'm doing podcasts, and I'm very intentional about my time blocks. I'm very consistent with my behavior, and I try to pay very, very close to attention to make sure that I'm serving people in the way that I tell them I'm going to serve them. But it's all about getting after it, right? It's about being authentic and having that edge and having fun doing what you're doing.
How have you found that transition?
Well, I'll tell you what.
Because, it's kind of like going from being an indoor cat to an outdoor cat when you go from working a corporate job or even working in higher ed to being an entrepreneur. You eat what you kill. And it's just it's a different environment. I think it's an easier adjustment for coaches because, you're working within what you would call a hierarchy or a corporation, as in academia, but it's a meritocracy and you measure yourself on your own scoreboard. So how's that transition been?
It's been really interesting because here's some of the things I learned that I didn't know I was going to learn, right? I've learned not to sweat the small stuff, not to be cliche-ish, but, everyone's funny because everyone says, God, I wish I had your life, right? I wish I could be an entrepreneur and be my own boss. And I said, listen, let me tell you something. It sounds really cool. It sounds very fascinating, right? It sounds very empowering. And I said, you get your ass beat every single day. So you better have some mental toughness. You better have some substance to you. I said, at the end of the day, I like to have my time. I like to sit in silence before I call it a day. Doesn't always happen when you have a 6-year-old and 8-year-old. Doesn't always happen.
Yep.
But I'll sit there and I said, and at the end of the day, when I'm having my quiet time, I am the single only person on the face of the earth, my wife included, that gives a crap what's going right and what's going wrong in my business. And I'm the only one who has the ability to make adjustments the next day. No one that works for me, no one that works with me, no one that 1099s, they cannot do it unless I put my stamp on it. And at the end of the day, that's the life of being an entrepreneur. But I'll tell you what, one thing I learned in athletics was, and especially coaching, and you appreciate this, in athletics, the highs are higher and the lows are lower. Yep. And somewhere in the middle is reality. And as a young dummy, okay, I lived up there, up and down, up and down. It wasn't until I got a little bit older that I figured out, and I had a great example. My father was very even keel. You could not rattle the man. It did not matter what would happen. And I think in entrepreneurship, I developed that ability to not lose my mind. And
a lot of that comes with age too, like that wisdom.
Yeah.
You don't have wisdom when you're in your mid to early 20s. So no. you're gonna rise and fall with the wins and the losses. And for those of you who didn't catch it earlier, Ed was a basketball coach. I coach lacrosse. Both of those sports involve a ball that if you drop it, it bounces. And if you look over Ed's shoulder, if you're watching this on video, you're going to see a pair of balls. Get your mind out of the gutter. They're basketballs. They're on his floor. But if you held that ball over your head and you just let go of it, it's gonna go down and up and bounce, and there's gonna be highs and lows, and then eventually it's just gonna stop. And I think that's a great analogy for, or is it a metaphor? I always butcher that term, but like that's a great. Let's say it's a metaphor. It's a great metaphor for like life as an entrepreneur. There's highs and lows, and like you can't be that ball. You just got to say, hey, look at that ball over there. It's having a rough day, and be right in the middle. And I think that's what we run into with people is like, oh, I'd love to have your life and your job and your career. No, you'd actually love to have your perception of what it is we do. You wouldn't love responding to emails at 2 a.m. or literally taking your work home with you every day because you have a home office and because you're, the captain of the ship. So yeah, it's perception and reality don't match, but the highs and the lows. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But isn't it funny? We wouldn't trade places with anyone. I mean, you and I, we've been beat up, right? I mean, we've been beat up and early on, it's like people would ask me, how do you survive it? How emotionally and and you'd always give my, hey, I've been through a lot worse. I'm past that. It's not about what I've been through anymore. It's about what I'm going through today and how I'm going to grow through it and how we're going to get better. How am I going to be 1% better today? And we talk as coaches, we always talk about, we need to be the face our team needs. Well, guess what? Every single day, you and I need to be the face that we need. Okay. We need to have the mind that we need. And that's what really matters. And it's been interesting. I'll tell you what, I've done a hell of a lot better job transitioning to be an entrepreneur than I did going from coaching college basketball to the mortgage business. I'll never forget the first day I walked into the office. Our office was at North Avenue in Wells, which is Old Town. If you're familiar with Chicago, it's a phenomenal neighborhood. Second City was 3 doors down from us. It was awesome. It was 98. It was a refi boom. Life was great. I walked in that first day in a suit. I mean, the minute I walked in, you want to talk about being way outside your comfort zone. And then I went and sat at my desk, and everybody around me is talking about, did you hear who's transferring where? Did you hear what coach got this job? Because right after March Madness, I just got back from San Antonio from the Final Four. There's something you ought to try. Get fired at Texas A&M and then go to the Final Four in San Antonio. That was awesome. But anyways, I digress. But anyways, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, and then you go through your day, you're like, okay, I should be in individual workouts right now, right? Okay, I should be doing this right now. I didn't do it. It took me about 6 to 7 months before I finally felt like I belonged. And it was for no one. There was no one else to blame but myself. And I think that's one of the things as an entrepreneur, you better take ownership for your actions and own your own dirt right away.
Yep.
Because that's all, it's on you.
Absolutely. I think, it's, the lesson in accountability that we all get. And a lot of times, the only way we really learn that is the hard way. There's, today there are some courses in entrepreneurship, but people typically don't major in entrepreneurship and say, when I get out of college, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And there's really no playbook for it until you figure it out by doing and fall on your face a couple of times. Ed, what do you think was the hardest lesson you've learned?
I think I'm still learning it, to be honest with you. I think there's so many people that everyone's experts, right? Even though they're not doing what you're doing. And I'm talking about people in our space though, like they're successful, they're doing things, but you've got to be really true to what your vision is. And you got to be really true. And you've got to always, and we hear it all the time, but you've got to know your why. You've got to have a singleness of purpose, but you've got to be true to your vision. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is your organization, is your company, is what you're doing, living and breathing what you had in mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Because if it isn't, you're not going to have the passion that you had. You even might grow to resent it. So I think being able to have vision, being able to see the floor, so to speak, but not get distracted by all the other things going around. There's the comparison gap. Like you know what you're capable of, right? We all know what we're capable of, but you've got to be patient and get there. And you need to be quick, but not be in a hurry. You need to be able to continue to be resilient and realize that, I go back to the Stockdale paradox and Jim Collins' Good to Great. And they asked him which people didn't make it out of the Hanoi Hotel. It was the optimist. People are shocked by that answer, but it's the truth. Well, in 2 years, this will be our revenue. Well, no, it won't. Okay. It takes twice as long. It's twice as expensive.
Yeah. It's going to be like a healthy skepticism, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be reality. You have to be very resilient. You have to embrace the reality of the situation. Believe me, be optimistic, right? But you be positive, operate with positive energy. But that's really been the biggest thing, is to realize, and that's why I say I'm still learning it, is every day is going to be something new.
Yep.
And you just you have to go with it.
Yeah, and there will be a lot of self-proclaimed experts to try and chime in with their 2 cents. There's an old Babe Ruth quote: "Loudest boos will always come from the cheap seats. People who invest the least in you will have the most to say about you." And you just have to trust your work.
Right. Well, I think that's why we get along so great, though, because you don't want to be me. I don't want to be you, but we both have a ton of admiration and respect for each other, and we do the same thing.
And I wouldn't wish being me on anyone other than me.
Uh-oh, you froze.
We froze. We're using Zoom, and there's a little bit of buffering, I guess, issues with the video. Are you still there, Ed?
I am still here. Right. Yep.
No, I was just saying, you said you don't want to be me. I don't want to be you. I said, I wouldn't wish being me on anyone other than me. Like, you don't want to be inside my head.
Right.
But so if people hadn't figured out yet, basically we're asking each other questions. I ask him 4 questions. He asks me 4 after that. And question number 4, Ed, actually is, what's the one question I didn't ask you that I should have? What were you expecting or hoping me to ask that I didn't? This is your chance to shame me, point out to both of our audiences how I just terribly dropped the ball on you here.
Man, first of all, you just said that's a great question, right? But I don't know if I have anything for you, because I have so much for you that you could ask, but I'm going to turn that right back around. What's the one question that you wanted to ask that you didn't ask?
I just asked it and you punted.
No, you got to remember. Hey, you got to remember, I grew up a Chicago Bears fan. So back in my heyday with Walter Payton, it was Payton punt. So I'm used to that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I guess the one question I love to ask people is, what do you know now that you wish you knew back when you got started? And I don't mean when you got started as an entrepreneur. I mean when you got started. Yeah. You left college, went out into the quote real world. What's one thing you know now that you wish you would have known back then that really would have served you much better?
It's funny you asked that question. There's no such thing as irony, right? So on this coming Wednesday, I'm speaking to 30 college coaches via Zoom. And a lot of them are younger, some head coaches, some phenomenally successful head coaches, some younger assistant coaches. And they want me to talk about this very thing. They want to talk about the relationship building. And when I was coaching, when I first got it, here's what I did. I played hard and I worked hard. Okay. And I don't think at an early age, I realized the significance of life wasn't just all about working hard, right? It was about working the right way and being the right person for the right reasons, and not to compare. Here's one for you: not to judge others by comparing their worst actions by my best intentions. Okay. Yep. And as a young college coach, I did that. I was just going to outwork you. Yeah, I might screw up off the court. I might stay out too late, but I'd still be the first one at the gym to go see people play the next day. Right. And I didn't, and here's the other thing I didn't do at a young age. I didn't give myself enough credit. When I realized we were starting to build something special at Lewis University Division II school, and they went on to build something extremely special without me. But I don't think I realized the significance of the kids we were signing, the things we were accomplishing, and the habits I was developing. Although I thought they were easy to break, I didn't know how difficult they were going to be to break later in life. And nor did I realize that how you do anything is how you do everything. Right. So at some point it was going to catch up to me with how you play hard and you work hard. And when I went into the mortgage business, it followed me there, and it was by no accident. And I didn't give myself enough credit to realize the impact I was having on others' lives at a young age.
I think that's pretty common for college coaches. We're grinders, and we're going to outwork other people. If we have less resources, we almost feel like we have to outwork other people, and it starts to rub off in other areas of our life, and we lose balance. So your answer to the question is the exact same answer I would give if you asked me the same thing. I became a workaholic, and it affected my health and it affected my relationships, and not in a good way.
Right.
So yeah, and it's hard to unwind. It's hard to get that out of your kind of your DNA and your wiring.
Right. And then
It's an ongoing lesson you have to work at every day, right?
you still do. And and one of the things that's really big, and one of the things we're talking about Wednesday is relationships. And when I got to A&M, the writing was already on the wall for Coach B. It was I got there for his 5th season. They had already had some issues. And when I got there, it was us versus them mentality. And that's, as an undersized guy playing college basketball, that's sort of what you thrived on, right?
Yep.
Like, I'm going to show you wrong. I'm going to have an edge, a chip on my shoulder. And when I got there, it was, for whatever reason, whatever immature, God only knows reason, I had the mentality, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you cross Coach, you cross me. I didn't realize I could have been a conduit to great relationships, or I could have at least, if I focus on being authentic, something we love to talk about, if I focused on being authentic and operating with honesty, integrity, and vulnerability, and just building relationships for what they were, and realizing that everybody had a story. And it was my responsibility to get to know their story. It wasn't their job to get to know my story. It was my job to get to know their story. That's something I failed at early on miserably. The only people I cared about were the players and the coaches.
Yep.
Okay. At the end of the day, that's not what it's about. And especially when you start getting up there later on in life, are you worried about your resume virtues, or are you worried about your eulogy virtues? What are you worried about? And, and you understand what I'm saying. I mean, you get to a certain point. It's like, you don't go to work every day and say, God dang it, I'm going to build my legacy today. No, that's not what you build a legacy by going there and doing the right things, and that's serving other people and getting to know them and what makes them tick, and not just limiting it to who you think is important.
Absolutely. I love it. It's great stuff, Ed. I want to encourage everybody, again, go to the molitorgroup.com, sign up for Ed's email list, which will automatically put you on his podcast list. It's a great podcast, as you're witnessing right now. Again, it's themolitorgroup.com. Head on over there. And now I think we're turning the tables on this bad boy, aren't we?
We are turning the tables on the bad boy. For my audience, I'd like to welcome them back to another episode of the Athletics of Business podcast.
Let me hand the microphone over
to you. Literally hand the mic over? Got it.
There we go.
I'm not as creative as you. That's one of the things I really admire about you, is your creativity.
I try.
Yeah. But you make it seem like it's effortless.
Well, it is. Just wing it.
Do you like how I put the ball in the tee for you right there?
That's perfect.
And not only did I get the ball in the tee, I told everyone to be quiet while you're in your backswing too. So I would like to welcome Coach Bru, coachbru.com. You and I connected, gosh, it's been a year now, maybe?
I don't even remember how we connected. So if you can refresh my memory, that'd be great, because I think I'm getting senile.
I think I saw something about the book Stadium Status. I thought, how cool is that? Okay, there you go. See, like that pub, pull it up right there. All right, get that minute. There you go. Taking your business to the big time. And I love the whole concept and the name, and I like the whole idea behind the book, because that's really what it's all about, right? That's what people want to do. And I looked you up, I Googled you. I'm like, well, look at this. I'm like, someone else who believes in the very same things that I believe in. Very similar past. I was blown away. Do
you want to know how similar? I don't even think you know how similar. You ready? You sitting down, Ed?
Wait.
Are you sitting down?
I know I'm short, but I ain't that short. Yes, I'm sitting down. But I do know that you were fired on your birthday.
Here's what you don't know. What's the name of your podcast?
The Athletics of Business podcast.
Okay. You want to know the name of my LLC, the name of my company?
What's that?
The Sport of Business.
Sport of Business. I did not know that.
We are brothers from another mother.
Yeah. How about that? Huh? And I might say both those moms did very well. Look
how smart and handsome we are. My God, yeah.
I did not know that. See, I learn something new every day.
So that's why I said we're kindred spirits. And I didn't think you knew that, and I was saving that to drop on our podcasts.
That's awesome.
I've been holding on to that for like 5 conversations now.
You have. That's interesting. Speaking of, so back to what we're talking about. So somehow, but I think I got on your mailing list. I sent you, hey man, love your stuff. This is great. Would love to connect sometime.
How do people get on my mailing list? I forget.
They get on your mailing list by going to coachbru.com, right? Putting in their name and their email address. And let me tell you something, you're part of a pretty unique and powerful inner circle. All right. and you'll receive a weekly newsletter. And what else you told me about that? You get all sorts of good stuff.
They get a digital download of my premium newsletter that's $99 a month, goes to my inner circle. They get a free sample of that just by going to the top of my website page, coachbru.com, and signing up for my list, the Daily Brew.
I apologize. I left out the point that it was at the top of your website. But we know you're very successful, so it would have to be at the top of your website page, right? You wouldn't want it at the bottom of your website page.
No. Oh,
no. Okay. All right. Hey, speaking of your website page and speaking of your stuff, I love the chin up, chest out, okay, and move forward. Can you unpack that for us? Because that's really powerful. And you know that I know why it's powerful, right? But I love the gear. And by the way, is that
shameless self-promotion?
Oh, not shameless at all. Is that part of being on your podcast? I get a little bit of gear.
It might have to be. It might have to be. It might be part of me being on your podcast. I don't know, but
either way,
we'll get you some swag.
Can we make that happen?
So chin up, chest out is basically my mantra. It's a mindset. It's a way of life. It's more than just a catchy phrase. But what it is, Ed, is I think it's the way you have to go through life, because life's going to kick you in the teeth. And they're going to be curveballs. They're going to be things like this quarantine that we're dealing with right now. And, as opposed to ruminating about the past and having anxiety over what's going on, you just need to keep your chin up, your chest out, and move forward. And there's so many negative media messages, we're exposed to, on the average, the average American's exposed to 10,000 media messages a day. And what happens is they're overwhelmingly negative. It's that the mainstream media today, the mantra is, if it bleeds, it leads. So you're hearing I call it fear porn. You hear all the fear porn about the coronavirus and how, the world is just falling apart. And that can affect your mindset. It can affect your mood. And you need to be performing a positive advertising campaign, a positive media marketing campaign for yourself. Otherwise, if you let all the advertising come from external sources, you're going to be in a bad mood, and you won't even know it. So this is my advertising campaign. Keep your chin up, your chest out, and move forward. And it's really, I think it's a pretty powerful one.
And there's so much about that too, right? In the example you used, the UCLA-Oregon game, I remember watching it. My good friend Kevin McKenna was like a big brother to me. He's the associate head coach at Oregon. I remember watching it. I thought, how cool is that? Because people don't understand how hard that is for a college kid to do in the moment. You know what I'm saying? It's not like it was a dead ball in practice where same things happened 5 times in a row. I mean, that was a significant moment in the game. That was a big deal. And for that kid to have that presence of mind to do that, which kind of makes me spin a little bit this what we were talking about as an entrepreneur. Can you talk about, with your mantra, the chin up, chest out, move forward, how important it is for you to be present in the moment and to realize what story you're telling yourself?
It's super important because to take your audience, and most of my audience already knows this if they've been listening to this for any period of time, but to take your audience kind of behind the scenes, like the last year, 2019 was a rough year for me personally and professionally. I dealt with a bunch of health issues, unexplainable stomach pain. I went to specialists. I had a lot of tests done, and it would come and go. And as soon as I thought it finally, it was debilitating pain. As soon as I thought it finally went away and, okay, I'm healthy again. Everything's good. Business as usual. I started getting these debilitating headaches. And that came and went for a couple of months. And then towards the end of 2019, I actually had a herniated disc in my neck that, again, like if that's never happened to you, it's horrible pain. You can't sit up straight. You can't sit at a desk. Basically, the only time you're not in pain is when you're sleeping. So I slept a lot in 2019 between those 3 things. And, a lot of times your physical symptoms affect your emotional state as well. Your physical state and your emotional state are intimately connected. And I got depressed. I started to suffer from anxiety of like, oh, what's going to happen to me next? Or right when I felt like I had one thing beat, it felt like I was playing a game of whack-a-mole. Right when I had one thing beaten down, something else would pop up. And I really just had to figure out a way to cope with it and move forward, in a positive way. And, it turned out like the stomach pain was all psychosomatic. I didn't have like an ulcer or anything. Same thing with the headaches. It was all just tied to, my emotional state. And so, that's a big part of the reason why I came up with this mantra, but I also founded this company. It's a lifestyle apparel brand. It's really a way of life, but a percentage of all the sales go to mental health organizations.
That's awesome.
And there's been such a stigma, especially for entrepreneurs. Your odds are exponentially greater of suffering from depression if you're an entrepreneur. That's something I learned this past year, and people don't like to talk about it. So I'm willing to share my story and talk about it. And it's you're fighting a daily battle to make sure that you keep your mind right. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
And thank you for doing that. I mean, it's huge,
Yeah.
and it's so important. We talk about mental toughness a lot, right? There's a difference between mental toughness and needing to talk to somebody about something that you're going through, needing to talk about something that you're experiencing that you don't really understand why you're experiencing.
Yep.
We pride ourselves, people like us pride ourselves on being able to just put our head down and grind and fight through it. We're going to play through pain, right? Whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, but at the end of the day, that's not what works, and that's not it. And
that's a great example I love to give too, Ed. You talked about the mental side and the physical side. What do athletes, what's the average human being? What are you supposed to do every year? You're supposed to go to the doctor for your annual what?
Physical.
But no one ever goes to the doctor for an annual mental.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It's just as important. It's probably, arguably, it's probably more important. But people don't do that. There's a little stigma against that. And it's unfortunate.
Yet most of us know that the number one predictor of success for C-level executives is what? Their self-awareness. And isn't that what's knowing what you're going through, knowing where you're at mentally, physically, emotionally. And I've never heard the annual mental, and I love that. I mean, there's something about that. And it's a feedback loop on where you're at and how you're doing.
And I think people look at it as like a sign of weakness to ask for help. No, actually it's not. It's a sign of strength. You look at the greatest players in every sport, Tiger Woods, and he was in his prime, Michael Jordan, whoever it might be in whatever sport, Roger Federer. The best don't have a coach because they need a coach. They have a coach because they want a coach. They go out and seek someone out because they know they don't have all the answers. You can't see the forest through the trees, and they want that outside perspective. So why should we be any different? I actually think everybody ought to be in therapy at some level, whether it's a counselor, executive coach, a life coach, or a psychotherapist. You need someone to talk to because you don't want to burden your spouse with those problems. Your friends get sick of hearing all the crap you have to complain about. You need an outside voice that you can vent to, but also give you some perspective. Is hugely important.
Well, you need a safe place, right? And by safe, I don't mean soft. I mean, you need a safe place to be able to go and say what's really going on. And our friends, and I have some very, very, very close friends. They know me. They know my crucibles. They know the demons I have had. They know some struggles I've had, but they don't know what's going on because to sit and talk to them, I don't want to say it'd be fruitless. It's more productive to go talk to a coach or talk to a different friend or talk to a coaching buddy of mine who's been through something similar. And, and that's something, I spent a lot of time as an executive coach is just helping people look at a situation differently. And it could be a simple pivot, right? And we need to do that more often. And I think that's something, for me, and this goes back to the question you asked me earlier, what's something as an entrepreneur that I do? What does my day look like? I spend an inordinate amount of time, a significant amount of time really running feedback loops. How was I feeling? How did I perform? What showed up? What was my block? What was the reason for my success? And I do that after every coaching call or every coaching meeting, every keynote I do, whatever it is, I'm always running feedback loops because I want to know when that moment arises again or that emotion arises again, I want to know what I need to be telling myself.
And I think it's super important for anyone listening to this to do that because you spend so much time as a leader helping other people get out of their own way. How much time do you really spend helping yourself get out of your own way? Yeah, we need to be able to not just have that outside perspective of everyone on our team. We need to be able to quietly sit down and look at ourselves in the mirror.
Yeah. So how did you do it? How did you move forward? How did you begin to move forward after you had those issues last year?
Started seeing a counselor and a therapist. It's the best money I've ever spent. It's so interesting, Ed. After I left that first appointment, it was a 60-minute appointment. I'm just like, I haven't, we didn't accomplish anything other than, her kind of listening to the backstory. But I felt so much better just having, a non-judgmental outside voice just be there as a sounding board. And, that was just long overdue. So it's been a process just like anything else, but, monitoring what I consume, whether it's my food, or my mental diet of not listening to the news and the media, and not listening right down to not listening to depressing music, listening to inspirational, upbeat things, messages, people, connecting spiritually, I don't think it's any one thing, but it's really a holistic approach, and being very selective about the people I spend my time with, which clients I take on, because, attitudes and moods are contagious, as you know,
Right.
and just surrounding yourself with like-minded people who you're in each other's corner.
Let me ask you this along those lines, because one of the things I've found, I never had the ability to do this. I mean, it's full transparency. I sucked at this, but the ability to have grace with yourself. How important has that been for you? Because I would be my harshest critic. I would beat myself up, but the ability to say, you know what, you don't have to get it perfect.
That is, I think that's my Achilles heel.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I work on every day. It's something, I talk to my therapist about, because, as a coach, like you strive for perfection. You hold the standard so high that if you and your team aren't perfect, you're so close that the only people who can notice that you're not perfect are yourselves. The outside world doesn't see that, and that can be exhausting. And it is exhausting. So, I think that, a lot of emotional fatigue people experience or feel, it's probably because they're holding themselves to such a high standard. I'm not saying it's unrealistic. You should almost have insanely, unrealistic standards and goals,
Right.
but it's unhealthy not to be able to step back from it and, separate the who from the do, as I like to say. Like, what you do is not who you are. It's just what you do.
Right.
So we tend to over-identify if we're not careful. And
so let me ask you that, because that's something very similar. Now, you were a head coach at a very high level, but identifying who you are by what you do. For me, big time guilty when I was coaching college basketball. When I got out of it, big time guilty. Creating my new self identity. You don't have to reinvent yourself, right? It's an extension of who you are at the core, right?
Yeah.
Your values and beliefs and behaviors. But how challenging was it for you? And take my listeners through your journey. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
How you got to this point, because I find it so fascinating. And how difficult was it for you to be able to realize I'm not that, just right there, separate the who from the do?
Sure. So my backstory, taking you way back, was I was a college lacrosse coach for 12 years. I was the youngest head coach in Division I at age 26. I had no clue what I was doing. I was grossly unprepared for the job. I was a Division III assistant before I became a Division I head coach. You're never fully prepared, but you're certainly, I certainly wasn't.
Yeah.
I spent 12 years as a college head coach. My last coaching stint, I had taken the team that never had a winning varsity season to the NCAA Final Four. We ended up losing the national semifinal after holding a lead the entire game. In the fourth quarter, we couldn't win a face-off, and we lost to the eventual national champs. Each of my 3 years were ranked in the top 10 nationally. You could probably tile the floor and walls of our offices with, all conference, academic all conference, all American plaques. We enjoyed a lot of success. I don't share that to impress you. I share that to impress upon you. We had a good nucleus of players and good people. And that's how higher education and, minor sports at the small college level has gotten insane. As in spite of all that success, in 2004, I was fired for not winning a national championship. And I was fired actually on my birthday, which was 16 years ago yesterday.
Wow.
So every year I celebrate two birthdays. My birthday, the day I was born, and really the day I was reborn, which is June 14th, 2004, because I was out very publicly, out, fired, not resigned, not stepped down for personal reasons, fired. And really had to reinvent myself. I had a wife, a newborn baby, and a mortgage. Talk about like, a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. And that's really kind of the day I became an entrepreneur. I went to work for ESPN Radio and hosted a sports talk show in the Carolinas. I was also the sales manager for the station. And it was, I wasn't an entrepreneur in the sense that I owned my own company, but, when you're working straight commission,
Mm-hmm.
The person who's a commission salesperson that thinks he isn't self-employed has a fool for a boss. You're exactly. Self-employed. Yep. So did that for 3 years, and the station was sold at that point. Like, media is brutal. They'll sell the station, and then they'll offer you your job back after they fire you for like 15-20% less, or they bring their own guy in. And I wasn't about to go through that. We were in the process of moving back to New England. I live in Maine. And so we moved back to Maine. I went to work for Fox Sports Radio up here doing the same job. Clear Channel sold off all of their small market radio stations outside the top 100. So I was out again, and I realized, like, I just want a job where I control my own destiny, and I am my own boss. And that is the day I really became a self-employed entrepreneur and founded, my own company, The Sport of Business, aka CoachBru.com. So you asked me about overidentification, how much of a challenge, how bad was it for me? Several years removed from coaching, I still went by the brand Coach Bru. To give you an idea, I've never not identified as a coach. I think that I have a little healthier perspective on it now. I'm still coaching. It's just, who I'm coaching, what I'm coaching is a little different. And, the only thing that's really changed are my recruits. But I think, when you're coaching athletes, it's leadership, life skills, and whatever the game is. And when you're coaching executives, small business owners, whoever it might be, is leadership, life skills, and whatever their game is. Their game might be life insurance, real estate, owning a plumbing and heating company, whatever it is. It's still a game. There's still scoreboard. So that's really the only change. But, trying to separate the who from the do. I think the best way I could put it is having kids, at the end of my coaching career as a college coach really changed me, because it wasn't all about me. I never thought I'd get married. I thought the only ring I wouldn't wear a wedding ring until I wore a national championship ring. But that changed because I met the right woman. Right. And having kids changes you, and it changes your priorities. I look at it for a coach. If there are coaches listening to this, coach having kids is kind of the athletic equivalent of giving a death row inmate a puppy to take care of. Like, it just changes your perspective. It's not about you, know? So
and you realize what's really important too.
And that's being a father and a husband. And that's how I identify now. And just what I happen to do is I'm a speaker, author, and coach.
And a damn fine one. And you know what? That's a great segue into you realize that the core values you have at home as a father and a husband are the ones that you need to transfer over to your lacrosse program, right? Or to your basketball program or football program. And to me, that screams authenticity, honesty, integrity, vulnerability, but that's the integrity piece and the consistency piece. Can you talk about, you and I have had some great conversations wrapped around this. Can you talk about this? And yes, this is one of the questions I had written down. Can you talk about, because I believe you ooze this, can you talk about authenticity and how significant that is?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to anything you do, you're not in the coaching business. If you're a coach, you're not, let's say you sell real estate. You're not in the real estate business as a realtor. Whatever you're doing, like, there's the business you think you're in, and there's the business you're really in. And the business you're really in is in the relationship business, and is in building trust. And you can't build trust with someone if you're being anything other than yourself. Because, especially, I'm going to sound like the old get off my lawn guy. Get off my lawn, you darn kids. But, like, especially with the younger generation, they can smell it a mile away if you're not being authentic,
Yeah,
you know? And I think it's incredibly important today more than ever with Photoshop, auto-tune. If you're a musician, you know, things have been auto-tuned, video edited, photoshopped within an inch of their life. That there's no authenticity anymore in these finished products, which is why, like, I don't do any editing of the podcast. I keep it authentic. You know, what we're doing right now is the finished product people are going to see and hear. That's the way people want it. They want the raw and unfiltered truth, even if it's painful or uncomfortable, because that's life, that's reality. And if you're not being that, I think you're not going to be successful until you're 100% transparent and authentic. There's no trust.
Well, that's it. And the trust is a cornerstone. Because what we talked about, you're in the relationship business, you're in the people business. You know, it might not always be the business you think you're in. But and speaking of people, I mean, you have this amazing ability to connect others. Where did that come from?
I have no idea. Other than
I was waiting for some holy grail of an answer, and you give me I have no idea.
I just I take a lot of pride in helping other people be successful. I think if you help other people, you know, it's the old Zig Ziglar quote. If you help enough people, other people be successful and get what they want, you'll get what you want. But, you know, I love nothing more than seeing my friends, my colleagues, my clients win. And anything I can do to put them in the best position to be successful, I'm going to do. And, you know, when you've coached as long as you and I have, and you've traveled the world and, you know, worked in different states, you know, one of the things, this probably is the real answer to your question. How did I develop this? Well, I developed a Rolodex that's pretty widespread and pretty diverse. If you're a millennial listening to this, you can either go ask your parents or you can Google the word Rolodex, Rolodex. But it's your database, your contact list, your network. And, you know, you travel the country coaching and you develop a pretty wide, deep network of good people. And I've never let go of or lost any of that network. I've always cultivated those relationships. Everywhere I've coached or worked, I've left on good terms with a lot of friends. Even the place where I was fired. I still keep in touch with a lot of people I worked with there. They're good people. And, you know, I just love to help other people win. So that's your answer.
Well, and that speaks volumes about you and your character, and I appreciate that about you. And isn't that true though? The Rolodex. Do you remember going to the Final Fours and getting the business cards? I mean, maybe and then you put it in there, you staple it in there, you tape it in there. Because I can't even read my own handwriting sometimes, right? So I just put the business card in there. Still have boxes of business cards.
And now there's like an app on your phone where you just bump your phone to the other person's phone and it exchanges contacts. I'm like, that's almost too easy.
It is. It is.
You can't see it, touch it, feel it. It's just in the cloud, you know. And I think like we're over reliant on technology to the point where things aren't top of mind enough for us anymore. You know, I keep a physical address book. I keep a physical calendar because I think those are the important things that need to stay top of mind.
Well, and there's so much power, and we can get into the science of it because obviously we know that, but there's so much power into writing things down, not typing up a journal. I have a client, she's amazing. And she's like, couldn't I just type my journal? No, you write it down, and here's why. And it's just, there's so much more power to it in the memory and all that. But, you know, in connecting people, sharing relationships and things like that, you've also done an incredible job of sharing your knowledge and your experience with your books. But let's not just talk about the books. Let's start with, because I love the story about how you started writing books, right? And how you got to that point. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I just, you know, when I got fired, one of the coping mechanisms for me was just simply journaling, you know, reflecting on, I think any fired coach will tell you they want to chronicle. Like I thought I was going to go back into coaching and I just was chronicling like, what did I do right? And when I get a chance to do it over, what am I going to do differently? And it wasn't so much X's and O's and things like that. It was leadership. It was culture. It was like, you know, looking at kind of the intangibles and trying to get some clarity around that. So I was just keeping a journal and, taking it beyond athletics, like how, because I was working in corporate America for ESPN radio, and it was, what are the parallels between sports and business? It was the sport of business. What are the parallels between recruiting and sales? It's the same thing. Recruiting is sales. What are the parallels between leading an athletic team and leading a sales team? Scoreboard, wins and losses, is awfully similar. And what's the parallel between building a culture, a winning culture, with a lacrosse team, football team, basketball team, whatever it might be, and building winning culture in your company? Awful lot of transferable parallels. I think you want to solve a lot of the world's problems, whether it's government, politics, corporate leadership, put a coach in charge.
Yeah.
Because coaches know how to win. They know they're measured on a scoreboard. They know all about accountability, leadership, surrounding themselves with people who complement their strengths. Mm-hmm. So I wrote a lot about that. And one of my friends came to visit me, my best friend. And I got up to go to the fridge. We were sitting in the living room, got up to go to the fridge to grab us a couple beers. And he starts flipping through my journal while I'm gone. He's like, "This is an awesome book you're writing, Bru." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like, he's like, and he holds it up and just this, And I'm like, "Man, give me that back. That's my diary. That's my journal." He's like, "No, it isn't." He's like, "You could at least turn this into blog posts. This is great stuff that other people can learn from." And I really didn't want to do that. I didn't set out to write a book with that. And he kind of talked me into it. He did the editing. His name's Paul Weaver. He's my best friend. He's an awesome guy. He's literally the smartest person I know, masters in rhetoric and fiction. And he encouraged me to publish. So I did that. And one book turned into two, which turned into, now I'm working on number 13. One of them's been adapted to a screenplay for a Hollywood motion picture. That hasn't happened yet. Eventually,
it's going to happen. Seeds for Success, correct?
Yeah, seedsofsuccessbook.com. And it's been an interesting journey, and not one I ever would have anticipated was going to turn out the way it did. But I'm very thankful.
So, what was that like writing the book? Did it just start to all of a sudden come to you, or was it really a grind?
The first one was a grind because, at that point you're still trying to find your voice. It's kind of like if you're a coach, you're still trying to figure out how to pitch the university you just started working at. You don't know all the nuances of how to really sell it or how to articulate things in the smoothest way possible. It's an awful lot like that. And it just becomes trial and error. You need some outside perspective and people to kind of help you polish it and make it shine. So to give you an example, the first book took 1.5 years. Seeds of Success, I think, took 6 weeks. And I wrote it by hand as opposed to sitting at the keyboard. I just wrote it by hand on a legal pad with a pen. Yeah. It just really kind of flowed out of me because it was more, everything about it is something I lived. And, it was more like a modern business fable. Yeah. Where I could take some creative license and change some names. Make it more of a story, but every bit of it is grounded in reality. And I think that just made the whole process a little smoother.
When you did that, when you went through the writing process, did you, without knowing it was happening, did you gain a different perspective on some things that had happened to you in your coaching career or your athletic career?
Absolutely.
You had a different way of looking at it, like, man, did I miss that or did I miss it?
Yeah, it showed me what a control freak I was. And, how, like, if you want a job done right, you do it yourself. I didn't really hand the reins over enough to whether it was my players or my staff. I just felt like no one's going to care about it as much as I did or do as good a job. Some of it was ego, some of it was paranoia, and just kind of I tend to be a control freak. I like things a certain way. Like if you look around my office, like everything has its place. I put my car keys in the exact same place when I walk in the door, my wallet, so I'm probably a little OCD, but so it exposed to me some of my flaws, and again, like how I would do things differently, in the future. I think everybody ought to go through that exercise when you transition out of something, anything. You don't have to publish a book, but you ought to journal.
Yeah.
There's a lot absolutely. To writing it down.
Yeah. Writing it down. You have to, you ought to journal. But the thing, was there ever a point in time early in your career, early in your coaching career, where you may have done something a certain way, knowing, because you know how it is when you're young. You think you have all the answers, but then you get to be our age now, and you realize that the more you learn, the less you really know, and the less you really knew back then. So was there something that you did early back then, okay, that might have changed the trajectory of maybe not your coaching career, but of your business? Like a habit, like a behavior, a habit, a mindset, a thought, or a way of handling things?
Early in my coaching career?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question.
Maybe here, for example.
Yeah, so give me a for instance.
So like, for instance.
Answer the question like I asked you that. How about that?
I could have been a lot.
You turned the tables on me on my last question. I'm throwing it back at you.
Yeah, I did. And that's fine. I'll get in catcher's position. I'll catch that. And here's the thing. It goes back to what I said that I would have done differently, right?
Yep.
I think I wouldn't have operated with such a chip on my shoulder all the time with everybody surrounding the program. You know, administrators aren't always against. It's like something I learned early on. Some of the people that were saying that, you know, our head coach really needed to be let go, they weren't bad people.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying they were right, but now in hindsight, I see what their thought process was and why that was their thought process. Doesn't mean I agree with it, but I developed habits of thought at an early age.
I got you.
That I wish I wouldn't have created. And maybe not with my current business now, maybe when I was in the recruiting industry, maybe when I was in the mortgage industry, you know, I didn't have to need to be such a fighter, such a brawler. I could have been a little bit more cerebral.
This is going to sound like I'm stealing your answer, man. And you could ask my parents, even as a kid, like I've learned this about me in adulthood, but I've always kind of lived in a very black and white world. You know, things are either good or bad. There's no gray in the middle. And, you know, when I was coaching, it was like, you're either for us or you're against us. There's no middle ground. And in a way that's good because you keep your circle tight. You don't have to worry about intel leaking so much, but at the same time, you alienate a lot of people who might be on the fence or who just might be able to help you, and just haven't totally bought in. So I think, like, you know, I probably made a lot of enemies because if someone wasn't 100% all in for us, I just took it. They were against us. It could be a director of admissions, financial aid, you know, someone in residence life, an assistant AD. And sometimes it was legitimate paranoia. They were all against me, you know, or all against us. And other times, you know, I didn't do a good enough job really kind of building bridges. I built walls. Yeah. So
isn't that the truth?
Great question.
Well, well, thank you. But it's the thing, like I always say, great free throw shooters never miss 2 in a row, right?
Yes.
So in other words, like if you're having a bad day at the office and you have a bad conversation with Bob, that doesn't mean you need to go and bring that same mentality and that same mindset and have a bad conversation with, you know, Nancy or Jen or whatever. I mean, you just early on, it's okay to be gray sometimes and figure out what it is and then get back to the black and white. Is it right? Is it wrong? Whatever it is. And just keep working towards, and obviously the whole thing, we lived in a world that was all about results. Yeah. Right. But the understanding that it's process driven, I think early in my career, I don't think I understood the significance of locking into the process every single day.
Yeah, it creates the routine. And, you know, I think our routines, our habits make or break us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Well, hey, this has been awesome. Again, coachbru.com. Go to the top of the website and sign up. And you'll get some incredible stuff. But I appreciate you so much. I appreciate you coming up with this whole concept and this idea. This is fun.
Yeah, this has been fun. I think we should do it again. You've made me think. My brain hurts a little bit, just from kind of reflecting on stuff that I hadn't really thought about before. But you know, that's how we grow.
Well, I hope your back's not sore from carrying me this last hour and a half.
It's been good. I'm just glad that we read our sponsorships, and you know, are there any other commercials that we ought to throw in, you know, for the Molitor Group or the Athletics of Business, or, you know, I mean, I've got one that I would throw out there for myself, but I want to hear.
I'll follow your lead. I'll follow your lead. Go ahead. See?
Really?
I want to serve you.
All right. So yeah, I would just say, based on my conversation with Ed, if this stuff has resonated with you, or if you feel like we are living in parallel universes and you want to improve that kind of internal marketing and advertising campaign to yourself, you can go to my apparel brand, which is Chin Up Chest Out. The website for that is a little unique. It's chinupchestout.store. And right now we're doing a summer collection, limited quantity, limited time only, but head on over there, chinupchestout.store, and check that out. This podcast has been brought to you in part by chinupchestout.store.
I love it. And you know what we'll do for our listeners? We will put the link to that website in our show notes, as well as coachbru.com. And
I'm doing the same thing with your stuff.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. Is there a single link where they can see all your books at once, or how do you want me to do that?
Yeah, they could just go to the books page of my website. I can give you that link.
See, you're the one who taught, the smart guys coach lacrosse, excuse me. Us dummies in basketball, I wasn't smart enough to figure that out. Anyways, we'll put that link in there.
And your sponsor, Ed?
We are sponsored by a couple sponsors, the molitorgroup.com, as I mentioned, but also the athleticsofbusiness.com. It's a phenomenal podcast, not because of me, just because of the guests that we have on. They share so many. I mean, we have folks, high-level CEOs. We have the John Brubakers, Coach Brus of the world, okay? We've had major college coaches. We've had NFL greats. We've had some incredible business leaders, sports leaders on there. But what's really interesting to me is they're all saying the same things in different ways, and they share great stories. And isn't that the way we learn? We learn through stories, which is just one of the many reasons I love you, Coach Bru, because you tell great stories, and you have the ability, and this is why your guys probably love playing for you. You have the ability to get emotional attachment to the things you're teaching. So kudos to you.
Yeah, I think we got to care. We got to be the first believer ourselves, and that's why your message resonates with me as well. The thing I'll say about your podcast, and I kind of try to emulate, my guests and my podcast after what you do, is you have a very dynamic and eclectic bunch, but it's all, as different as they are and diverse as they are, it's all centered around the same theme. Let's get 1% better. Let's lead better.
Yeah.
So this has been fun.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you very much, Coach Bru.
Awesome. And again, remember to go to themolitorgroup.com, go to coachbru.com. You can find all of our respective information to both places. This has been the Athletics of Business podcast and the Coach Bru podcast. So head on over to the links. You'll be glad that you did. And we'll catch you next time on both of our podcasts, because I'm confident now that everyone who listens to Ed's podcast is subscribed to mine. There's no question. And everyone who listens to mine is subscribed to yours. Mm-hmm. So
please do.
As they say in New Jersey, bada bing, bada boom. There we go. Thanks again, everybody.
Man. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to The Coach Bru Show. If you're not currently subscribed to the podcast, sign up now on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And for more information to turn your potential into performance, head on over to coachbru.com now.
Thank you for listening to The Athletics of Business. Be sure to give us a rating and review so we know how we're doing. For more information about the show, visit theathleticsofbusiness.com. Now, get out there, think, act, and execute at the highest level to unleash your greatness.